Good evening and welcome. My name is Mr. Russell. I'm the principal here at Littlewood, and I do appreciate you all taking the time this evening to come and show your support of Littlewood and provide input as we go through this exciting redesign process. And we're going to go over a little bit of the timeline, the scope of the project, and meet some of the team members involved in that redesign, but most importantly, get input from our community stakeholders. We held a similar meeting for our teachers and staff earlier today, and there was a very large turnout and a lot of opinions. So we were excited to hear about the teachers' ideas. We're also excited to hear from all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by introducing Suzanne Nguyen, and she's from our facilities department, and she's going to introduce some of the architectural team and some of the members from the facilities department that are part of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. I'm Suzanne Nguyen. I'm the Director of Planning and Construction and Facilities, and I'm going to introduce my team member, Justin Nappy. He is the project coordinator for this project. Also on the school board team is Jackie Johnson. She's our PIO. And I'd like to also introduce our design team. We have Renee Tersilla. He's with Harvard Jolly. He's the executive VP. And we have Chad Jones. He's the VP and the director of the Orlando office. He's our lead architect. We have Gina Otero. She is our project manager. And then we have Danny Kale, our local architect. So we have a really fabulous team, and we are looking forward to hearing from all of you. Chad.
Thank you. Like Suzanne mentioned, my name is Chad Jones. I have been working with the Alachua team for a few years now. We're actually next door. We're working on the Westwood renovation, and you can see it's actually under construction, and hopefully we're finished getting close to being complete at this time next year. So we're hoping to kind of do the same process with Littlewood. Tonight I'm going to introduce the project to you, but this meeting primarily is for your feedback and input. And so I have a little unique way of doing that. So hopefully I can get you all to participate when we get to that point. First, this is what we've been tasked to do. This is a major comprehensive renovation. So what that's going to end up doing is transforming the campus. The campus is older. Late 50s is when the campus started. A lot of the buildings are older, and it's time for a refresh. So the big purpose of this renovation is to refresh the campus. In the process of doing that, we're going to update the site amenities, and that's including the parent drop-off. And I know that's a bit of a mess to try to get in and out. And so that's one of the things that we want to address in the renovation. It's going to result in a demolition of some of the older buildings on campus, some of the older classroom buildings. And as a result, we're going to end up with new classroom buildings. In that process, we're going to increase the student count on the building. So right now it's about 588, and the process of the renovation is going to increase to 750. And hopefully we can do that and still make it efficient and better to use than the current layout. The buildings that are going to remain, we're going to also look at updating and renovating those with as much as the budget that would allow, and that would include mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. We're also going to look at make sure everything is very building code compliant as well as ADA compliant. A very comprehensive project. There's a lot that goes into it, but again, we don't want to start that process until we hear from everybody that it's going to affect. On the screen now, you see a map aerial of the existing campus. We are right now sitting more or less in the center of it, Building 7. The buildings to the east are most of the buildings that we're going to demolish. The newer buildings on campus will remain.
The Department of Education tells every district, every school district, what buildings they can tear down based on a formula that they basically evaluate whether the cost of replacing a building is more or less than the cost of upgrading a building. So this process all starts for every school district with a report that gets sent to DOE. DOE agrees with you or disagrees with you on what buildings can be torn down. The reason I bring that up is because as we start talking, you might say, well, why aren't you taking down this building? Well, because in their mind, that building doesn't cross that threshold. So the district does have some limitations as to how that applies. This is not a meeting where we're going to show you what the school is going to look like. We actually are taking a different approach. Rather than coming in and showing you this is going to be great, we want to talk to you before anything gets developed. And that's the hope for tonight from our end.
This shows the site as it would be without the buildings that we plan on being demolished. So this right now is the canvas that we will have to work with. And a lot of the input that you give us tonight and the input that the staff gave us earlier today will go into how that final presentation will look like.
The portables that we have on campus, that's something that, you know, when we say we're going from 588 to 750 student stations, that's permanent buildings, that's not portables. So one thing that's part of this project is getting rid of portables.
That is a very good point to make, because the school is not going from 580-something kids to 750. The reality is that some of those kids are in portables today. So part of this is part of the removal. I don't want you to think, oh my God, the school is growing by 30%. No, we're going to deal with the fact that some of these kids are already in portables as part of this solution, as part of fixing everything else.
This current map of the school, you'll see the portables and how they're spaced out and spread out. By eliminating that and integrating that into the new design and the new construction, it's going to make it much more efficient, make the site more usable for the school. Again, the intent is not to show you new designs, it's more for your input, but at the same time, we do want to get you excited for what is to come. And so we just want to show you some images of what, you know, projects in schools that we've done in the past and give you a little flavor of what is to come. So this is an example of a primary classroom that we've done. The next one would be a intermediate classroom. So that would be the bulk of the new construction that we would be planning on building. In addition to addressing the portable issue, we are also having to deal with the fact that right now the dining capacity doesn't work for the school. So we are looking at a couple different options of what to do and how to handle dining. And one of those ways is, and seems to have gotten good feedback so far, is outdoor dining as an extension of that space. Just want to touch on the schedule briefly. We are now starting programming, and part of that programming process is your input. So this is kind of the kickoff to kind of the design process. We'll work on the design throughout the summer and into the fall. Hopefully this time next year we're getting into bidding and permitting. And next summer, we're hoping to, as school ends, we're hoping to start construction. In terms of the end date, it gets a little tricky. Right now, our goal would be to move in fall of 2025, but there are a lot of factors that could affect that. And one of those factors is right now there's a premium on construction and construction materials and lead times, and all of those things affect how quickly we can get buildings done. In addition, if we're going to compress the schedule, it also costs more money. And so now we're balancing the increased construction costs with what you can actually get in the building. So in order to get it faster, that may mean less square footage. So all of those factors we are weighing, and the idea is that we want to deliver the best project for you that's going to have the biggest impact long term. And whatever way we can do that, we will do that.
So one thing I want to mention and reassure everyone is that we are trying to do the most that we possibly can as we redevelop this school and do it as cost efficiently as possible. And as we're looking at this schedule, in addition to higher costs, there is a reality still of long lead times for things like electrical equipment and HVAC equipment. And as Renee mentioned earlier, there are spaces that can't be finished until spaces are conditioned. That's something that we're looking at. We're also looking at reevaluating, possibly going, we went from CM at risk, GMP to hard bid with Westwood. We're looking at reevaluating that again, which is another construction delivery method. And that's, you know, so that's something else that we might be doing differently with this project.
I don't know what any of those acronyms are.
I'm so sorry. Construction manager at risk is a guaranteed maximum price. We bring them on board through a qualification process, and then they work with us through the pre-construction process to try and get the price down as much as possible with value engineering. It's just a different construction delivery method. And so that's traditionally what we've done. We changed that with Westwood, but we're looking at going back. The takeaway is we're trying to get the most done for the dollars, so we can, when we redevelop a school, it really has a lot of impact.
So like I mentioned, this meeting is about getting your input, and I want to hear from everybody that wants to speak. But I want to do it in a little bit of a unique way. I know as you walked in, you may have seen the pictures that are kind of taped to the tables. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to get up and walk around and take a look at all of the pictures. I'm going to give you a couple of prompts. Take some time, look at them, and then pick whatever picture that comes to mind in answering the prompts. This exercise is called Metaphoria, and the reason why I think this is important and this is a way of doing it is that you guys all have images or visions of what you think the school should be. Westwood, Littlewood, they all have emotional connection to you. Some of you went to both schools. You have children, obviously, that go to these schools. And so there's some sort of emotional connection. So what the images are designed to do is to elicit some of those emotions. And so the first prompt would be, thinking of the rich history of Littlewood Elementary School, this photo reminds me of the existing campus because blank. And so use the images to kind of help fill in that blank. When Alachua County Public Schools completes its mission of renovating the Littlewood Elementary campus and all the goals are met, our facility will be like this photo because blank. So there is a historic element to it. There's also a future element to it. And so at this time, I will ask you to just take a few minutes, walk around, and with those images, see if we can answer both of those questions. I guess I'll start. I picked the image, and again, I don't have a history with Littlewood, but I see this image, and I see an older hand, and I see a younger hand. I think of the history of Littlewood. To me, it symbolizes the connection of the old and what can be. This is invoking of kind of what I think the thesis of the design going forward should be. Anybody want to start?
Marty Dempsey is my name. I picked two. I'll give two real quick stories. One is just there was a couple of pictures out there of people being active. There's a lot of research out there about kids being at their best when their minds are sharp, and their minds are sharp often when they can include physical activity of some sort into their daily routines. And I know the morning mile here has been very popular with folks, and so just having things in the new design that creatively can get those things flowing. The second one that I had was an iceberg, and I know a lot of times when we look at an iceberg like this, we focus on the things that we can see above water, but really a lot of the things that happen with an iceberg happen below the water that we can't see. So I think just as important as all of the things, the creative classrooms, all of the beautiful colors and things like that that'll come, the support structures that are there, if you say that these buildings were built in the 50s, that means that it's a good chance that we'll be many decades with this new build. So what support systems are in place to make sure that we can adapt with the times, as it won't look the same in 2040, 2050, and beyond.
Thank you. Very good example. Who wants to be next? Volunteers.
Sure. I was going to wait until some other people, but yeah, so I also don't have a lot of history with Littlewood. I moved here from out of state, but in the time that I've been here, and our son started in kindergarten and is in first grade now, and I certainly have a sense of Littlewood being very green and being very close to West Side Park, and so and having been on the campus as a volunteer, I help out at Morning Mile, and so I'm here every morning, and I definitely think of the importance of green and of nature. And, whenever you're walking around outside on campus, there's kind of, you're out in the natural environment to a certain degree. And I think it is maybe dark in some ways, that it would be nice if it was both natural but also maybe opened up a little bit more. But I really appreciate, and I think Littlewood is a part of this kind of an extension of the West Side Park, which has recently been renovated. And so, being a very inviting outdoor space, integrating indoor and outdoor environments, I think would be a natural fit for Littlewood. Trying to extend maybe out into, gardening is something that I know some of the classes do. So maybe finding a way to focus on Littlewood being sort of a more natural applications of things you could do outside that suit this sort of setting.
I'll be continuing along the same themes. My picture was the bicycling people. My family bikes to school, along with lots of other families that bike and walk. And to me, that's a really essential part of my experience, and the reason I bought the house that I bought, so we could do that. So having a design that really facilitates that and supports and celebrates that sort of commute is something I value.
Hello. I actually chose the same tree one, and I have a second photo. Having been on campus, the natural setting is really important, I think, to students and faculty and staff. I think it can have a soothing effect on students when we have more and more kids who are dysregulated for different reasons. Like, it does have a really calming effect. They can go take a short walk break and then return to their classroom and, feel better. I don't know the science behind that, but I've seen it, and my son has experienced that, and it helps. The other picture that I thought about, it's two hands holding puzzle pieces going towards each other, and I think a lot about accessibility. And Littlewood is one of 3 elementary schools that have district programs, and so they have a lot of students with different needs. And so having accessibility as well as play structures that are inclusive would be really important as well. Anybody else?
So my daughter went to Littlewood. She started kindergarten here and went all the way through 6th grade. Or 5th grade, sorry. And she's getting ready to graduate high school. So I don't have new kids going here, but my daughter went here, and the faculty and the staff were very warm and very inclusive, but the facilities really don't match that inclusivity. And that's mainly why I came, and I brought my friend Audrey, who's good friends with my daughter. They've grown up together. And, as much as the staff tried to make things inclusive, the paths between the buildings and that kind of link between the buildings and the playground and the outdoors is not functional. So every time you have that, you have kids that have to leave their friends and then come back. So it would be really great to fix some of those things. Oh, and I know that you guys are the architects, and that link between architecture, landscape architecture, and the civil engineering, that's really key for this. Yeah,
and the teachers talked past that to educational opportunities in those cases as well. And not the traditional, everything's going to be ADA compliant and you can walk down the sidewalk. But the ability to be more inclusive in what they were doing educationally, and that sensitivity to that. So I hate to say it, but we heard that earlier today too, even from them.
Good.
So that's great.
Okay.
No pressure. So I have a history with Littlewood as well. My older daughter is going to be going into high school in the fall, so she also went K-5 here, had a wonderful experience, and just to echo a lot of what everyone else has said, I think Miss Anholt might have taken the picture I was looking for. It's just the hands together. It's a real community here at this school, and you feel that there's a lot of diversity, and I just want to see that continue throughout the classrooms going forward as well. But that means having accessibility and those sorts of things. And then the second picture I chose was something with clean lines. It just more modern, but yet having, again, that almost warm feeling from nature. So I don't know how to merge the two.
I also thought quite a bit about green space. Kathy's my wife, so my children are here and have gone through here. I think that the amount of green on this campus is special, and that's an element with the connectedness to the Loblolly Woods and to the park that I would like to see incorporated or at least appreciated in the new design. Keeping open space available while increasing the density of the number of students is going to be a balancing act, especially if you're going to be improving the drop-off space, which will take extra space. My hope is that we don't raise the canopy and then slap a bunch of hot buildings down. That we can keep it cooler and incorporate that into part of the design element. Mm-hmm. Who's next?
So I've only lived in two places. I've lived in Gainesville and Puerto Rico, and there's a street in Old San Juan that has these umbrellas just like this, and it symbolizes a sense of community, and it's really happy and optimistic, which I think Littlewood has a tremendously strong community and has served a diverse number of students with different abilities. And so my hope is that we keep community at the forefront, but also that we have something that brings forward the optimism when you walk into like the new Albert Ray Massey Park. It's a really happy, colorful place. And so I hope that in consideration of the design of the school, that it is colorful and joyful, reflecting the community that it'll serve and the children that'll be here.
Awesome. Thank you.
No gray.
No gray, right?
No shiplap.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, guys. My name's Mr. Knott. I've recently moved here about a couple of years ago. I lived in Connecticut and Texas for a good portion of my life, but I also have two kids that go here currently, and starting 2024, I'll have 3 kids going here. So it's extremely important to see what's going on, because all 3 of my kids are going to be going through this phase of this whole redesigning thing. I chose this picture because it kind of shows a bit of like a rustic side of Littlewood in my eyes. I've been a substitute for PE for the past month-ish. And, every day I see, kids, running around enjoying. I see this gentleman over here with the morning mile. And my son just recently started doing the morning mile this morning. And it does bring a kind of a sense of, I wish I would do a little bit more with the playground area that's over there, and getting rid of, the rocks and stuff like that, because he's fallen, and we've had other kids fall and get injured, and just be a little bit more, inclusive, maybe possibly putting some artificial turf there or something that, would be a little bit more, helpful for this kid's safety, and so that way they could enjoy it more, and you'd get that sense of green here. That's the reason for my second picture, and to kind of tag along with what everybody else is saying about how the, this has been a green, area here, and that people kind of want to keep that, nature feeling going to it. That's about it.
That's okay. Thank you for your input. Anybody else?
So I chose the picture that has all of the different colored and different sized hands. Some of these are young hands, some of these are old hands. They are all different shades of hands. And if you look really closely, you can see that those hands are all outside, which to me, this represents everything that Littlewood is. It's a community that all works together. Everyone works together. We've got beautiful green spaces where we can teach outside, we can play outside. I will second the part about a morning mile track would be really great. Being out there every day for morning mile, everybody knows how important it is to have our kids get their brains awake, get oxygen in their brains, get them ready to learn. And morning mile is just a phenomenal way to do that. So I would love to see not only that great green space, but a track to go along with it. So our kids aren't literally falling on rocks and coming in scraped up. So that'd be really great. So.
Anybody else? I'll open up the floor if anybody just wants to make any general comments beyond the pictures. I'll give you a chance to do that at this time.
I just adding on, I was thinking about windows, and I know that there's some rules or concerns about windows with safety, but I also know that like natural light is great. So I just put in a plug for as many windows as are allowed.
And I think
Skylights.
I think that's an example of, in a way, what you were talking about. You know, we're going to run into things that are challenges in that they're competing challenges, right? I mean, today the issue with windows is safety and security and nobody wanting to see the entire thing. And at the same time, there's research that shows the kids learn better with natural light. So we're going to have to get creative, just as the issue of how do we keep the green space, how do we keep the feeling of the small campus, and at the same time, how do we even deal with the additional drop-off and things like that that require really more space. And you know, our hope today was to hear all the things that are important to you guys, let you know that we're hearing that we have challenges like this. I tell people all the time, people don't get mad at you when you don't do what they want. People get mad at you when they think you didn't listen to what they wanted. So, I mean, this is not a one-time conversation. We're gonna at some point here have some work put together that we can show options and things like that, and you'll see some that are better than others based on your own individual priorities. You know, obviously, a community school needs to have community access, right? You know, the first comment about biking and walking, kind of hard to do when there's 8,000 cars on the street, right? So we'll be working, you know, trying to figure out how to do those things all in one time. There's things like color and making a school exciting, which is also important in all of this, because we are not coming to school. That 7-year-old is coming to school, right? And that 7-year-old needs to be excited by what they go to. So that may differ, as an example, from our vision of, you know, this looks quaint because it looks like a neighborhood. For the kid, that may not be what's the most exciting. And it's just another example of some of the things that we'll have to work through as we're doing that, and ultimately staying within the budget that the district has for the project. But we just wanted you to know that we're listening. The reason for the taping is that we're going to be able to take these things back and address them.
As a practical matter, I noticed that the cafeteria was one of the places that was going to be kept. And it's woefully undersized for the school, which results in kids having to eat lunch at 9:45 in the morning.
That's a little bit of the conversation I started at the beginning with the Department of Education. The Department of Education has determined that that building should possibly stay because it's more expensive to replace. That doesn't mean it doesn't get enlarged. That doesn't mean that you can't either increase the capacity in some way. We had a conversation earlier about it's not necessarily the kitchen side, it's the serving side. And so Chad and Gina had a picture up there of an outdoor dining area. We have a lot of people who actually believe that that's actually kind of nice. And yes, there are concerns about weather and how hot or how cold, and there are ways to sort of deal with that. But in all of this, we're going to address, just as the school was built for 588 and they're 718, we have more kids than can eat in that cafeteria today, right? And we're going to make that worse. So part of that is going to be addressing how we increase those sort of spaces, which aren't just cafeteria. I mean, today from an administrative standpoint, all schools have more psychologists and testing folks and individual folks. So even on an administrative offices and spaces, that's another one of those things that we don't think about when we're making the school bigger, because we're thinking kids. But all the support spaces are going to be dealt with as well.
And I think the other things that go along with that are the number of folks coming to this school. That creates some of the traffic issues, and that creates safety issues for pedestrians and bikers. And so we're looking at enlarging those areas, creating more staging, creating safer access for bikers and walkers to the campus. I've been in contact with Miss Eunice, who is our Director of Food Services, and I've talked through the food service area, and she feels the kitchen is sufficient, but it is the dining space that's the issue. And so there seems to be excitement about an outdoor dining space. The teachers seemed excited about that. It's something we're exploring, as creative ways to stay within the budget, but expand the dining area. The teachers wanted fans, if that was going to be the case, but that doesn't mean we're not going to look at expanding the dining, so that's the process we're going to be going through. So does that help? Yeah.
If they do the expansion, not of a outdoor space, but rather inside space, does that mean renovate the entire inside of the dining hall?
There's going to be quite a few buildings that are left on campus. And so renovating those buildings is going to be part of our conversation, and the extent to which we renovate is part of the budget. And that gets into, can we expand what we do because we extend the time for construction or the delivery, so all those things play into it. We want to do as much as we can. We've done that with our previous schools, like Metcalf. We renovated that area. We upgraded the lighting. We did painting and such as that. So we want to try and blend the new spaces with the existing spaces.
Would opening up some of the ESE and the pre-K area, would that be like something that you guys would look into?
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, we've recently opened a ESE exclusive school in Orange County, and we would like to take a lot of the lessons learned from that situation and integrate it in the renovation piece of it as well. So absolutely, we would evaluate all parts of the campus, including that.
And I guess what I want to say, because I mean we've got several. I see tons of kids here all day. Some in wheelchairs and some, who've got certain disabilities. And I guess making it more accommodable for them, especially because, some of these kids, they go into regular classrooms like him, and they go to PE or they go to, art or whatever, and just making it more inclusive for them as well, too.
Absolutely.
And it was part of the discussion with the teachers earlier today. And again, not just are we ADA compatible, that, the doorknobs and the sidewalks work, but what do we do to the spaces educationally so that they can become more inclusive in the instructional side of that?
Just a quick, is it possible yet that because this is a couple years out and it sounds like some of the constraints are based on the calculation from the Department of Education, is it possible that calculation changes and then buildings sort of like shift into or out of scope in the next couple of years, or is it like set in stone as to what gets, what's going to happen based on this map that you showed us?
It's a sort of twofold problem. It's the DOE, right, and their approval. The short answer to your question is it's highly unlikely that the difference in a year and a half is going to change that time frame or that approval. The other problem we have is that, like everything else in our lives, it's more expensive than it was last week, right? So every time we delay the project further, we conceivably increase the cost. And with the dollars being finite, then you're also reducing what you're doing because you waited longer. And so as Chad and Suzanne are talking about, do we do it in a year or do we do it in 2? That's part of the evaluation we're making, what gets us the most out of the dollar. But it's unlikely that that delaying it will actually get you more. It might very well get you less.
Just to piggyback off of that, I mean, the school was started in 1959. So this school, and I think a comment was made earlier that this school is going to be here for a long time. So, it might, that 3-4 months delay, that might give us a little bit more bang for our buck. That might be an inconvenience, especially for Principal Russell. I know, kind of moving in and out is not going to be easy, but we'll evaluate everything that, what is the long-term success of Littlewood going to be? And so all of that would go factor into that.
I've got family members that went to school here and also taught here, going back to the 70s and 80s. I'm just curious about everything I've heard so far. I was wondering about, well, safety, of course, is paramount, but I'm a history buff, and what about keeping some of the uniqueness and history here and there of this campus? In other words, don't whitewash over everything and just put new where something beautiful old is there. So I smiled when you said there's going to be multiple existing buildings left here. That made me smile. So I was just concerned about that. That's all. Thank you.
One thing that was mentioned at today's staff meeting with the teachers was where the street signs that are out on the campus that have the names of various administrators, principals, maintaining those, as well as I heard there were murals that students had done, as well as stepping stones. So they wanted us to look at preserving and repurposing as much as possible. So even if it was maintaining, keeping these signs, maybe making new signs, but having them maybe inside and possibly, in the hallways and outside, so those kinds of things were important to them as well.
So all of that would be, all of that will be taken into consideration. And we know we're dealing with a very historic school and the fact that it's very community oriented and there's going to be a lot of eyes on that. And so we will try to be as sensitive as we can to that and make sure that all of that is taken into consideration.
So when you were talking about the cafeteria, it made me remember my daughter when she was here, and the noise level of the cafeteria was extremely stressful for her. I mean, we did almost all eating outside while she was in school, or she would just not eat until she came home because she couldn't eat with the noise. So I wanted to just bring that up just to say, like, maybe if there's some way to do some renovations with paneling, that would be, or something, that'd be nice. And then I didn't see it, but the restrooms outside the cafeteria, are those on the demolition? Please? Please.
They are not, but we'll
Okay. So then many of the restrooms on this campus are extremely dark and not welcoming. And so that was another thing, is that I know that my daughter only used the office bathroom, and it was like 3 times in the whole time she was here. She would wait until she got home every day and then run for the bathroom. We used to try when she was younger to get in the portables because of the bathroom situation. So,
yeah, and what I can tell you is that, as Chad said, we just recently completed a school in Orange County that dealt with all sorts of exceptionalities, and we're cognizant of that. We understand the impacts of lights, colors, all sorts of things, and we will be thinking about that when we do that. And obviously there's going to be a balance between creating spaces that are for the kids that are going to be here in 30 years to the history of people that were here 30 years ago. Part of those challenges and competing challenges that we'll deal with. But that honestly is the point of tonight, to hear the things. I'm sort of amazed. I've been waiting. With everything we've talked about, nobody said, do something about the car line. and I know it's in the back of everybody's mind, but I think what's interesting is what you guys see as important. And so that starts to tell us a little bit as we get to those competing challenges.
Yeah, on the car lane. Yeah, certainly it takes a while to get through that in the morning. But as you also talk about how landlocked you are, I can understand and appreciate the priority level of expanding that comes at an opportunity cost of something else that you can do on campus. So I'm sure your team will be working on that. And yes, it does take some time to get through that lane. One of the questions that I did have for you is how is the scope dealing with futuring the future, the growth that could happen? You talk about right now there's 718, this is building for 750. It might not be long before 750 is pushing the envelope. So I know you're excited about knocking down all the portables, but is one coming back the year after once we get above that? Or how's the scope dealing with the continued growth of our population?
That's always a consideration that we have to include in all of our designs. In fact, Westwood is being built right now, and there's a part of it you wouldn't tell by just walking the campus that was meant for an expansion. And so from day one, again, the idea here is to balance as much as we can with providing the student amount of student desks that we can versus maintaining the outdoor space and the character and the natural that has been mentioned as, basically in every conversation, but then also planning for that future growth. So that all of that would be taken into consideration as we're planning.
I was just wondering if there was any consideration to keep the large oak trees that we currently have on campus.
Oh, absolutely. That's okay. Again, that's also part of it. It's again, there, a lot of. This is what makes our job difficult, right? Because there's a lot of different factors that we have to balance against each other. And
for sure.
I was telling the staff earlier today, the way that the campus kind of grew organically in terms of the building growth, you also see that with the trees. So let's take the classroom buildings that are adjacent to it. So the way that it was built up, obviously the trees grew up around it. Mm-hmm. So in order to maintain everything that's there, we have to build in the exact same footprint. Yeah. And so some of it isn't necessarily practical, but balancing that versus construction techniques, there are different ways that we can use that will help maintain as much as we can. Obviously, it's a balancing game. We still have to meet a certain goal in terms of student station count, but at the same time, we do understand the importance of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any last comments?
It's sort of more just a question. I was just thinking about how Littlewood is kind of unique and how visible it is to the community because it's on such busy roads. And I'm curious how you guys have thought about that and how that plays a role in things.
Something that's been in the back of my mind from the start of the campus is, although that's your administration building, I don't necessarily think it's the front of the campus. I actually think there's a lot more opportunity on that corner. 34th and 8th. And so that's in terms of, again, the idea isn't necessarily talk specifically about design, but in terms of creating an image to the campus, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's one of the areas we would like to address with the actual design of the, of the new spaces. We plan to come back to you maybe in the fall with some updates, and hopefully at that point we'll be able to show you some designs in terms of floor plans and maybe some renderings, get some feedback, kind of follow up on some of the conversations that we've had. If you haven't spoken, maybe you didn't feel comfortable or whatever, there's an opportunity for that online. You can use the link or the QR code. At that point, you can input anything that you feel like you weren't able to share tonight. So with that, I will turn it back to Principal Russell.
Well, thank you for coming. It was really interesting to hear how so many of our ideas tonight aligned with the staff and faculty ideas. I think we're helping the team here to get a really good sense of what Littlewood is all about and what's important to us. So I really appreciate your time tonight, and I hope you guys have a great evening.